10 years ago, I'm traveling in Argentina on vacation and noticing many kids in the streets not wearing shoes and not in school for that matter. And about 2 weeks into my trip, I was at a wine bar and having some conversation with some other Americans that were there. And the women I was speaking to, when I asked them what they were doing for the past couple weeks, they explained that they were doing volunteer work. And specifically, they were doing something they called a shoe drive. They were going around collecting slightly used shoes from wealthy families in Buenos Aires, and then taking them to children who lived in the outskirts in some of the villages and helping them get shoes so that they could go to school. Now, I grew up in Texas and middle-class family and never had to worry about clothes or food or any of these necessities. And so it was amazing to me that there were kids just a couple hours outside of Buenos Aires that were struggling to just get a simple pair of shoes so they could go to school. And as I was talking to these women and asking them a lot of questions about their nonprofit and the work they were doing, it came up that they were getting ready to do one of these shoe distributions in a few days, and I was still going to be in town. So I went with these women, and we showed up with a U-Haul full of these shoes, a couple volunteers, and as we pull into this town that was, really looked more like a trash dump. I mean, it was such difficult conditions. You saw kids and their parents kind of coming out of nooks and crannies and aluminum-sided, shanties, and it was amazing to me to see how excited they were that we were not only there, but that we were bringing them these shoes. And so I worked all afternoon that day putting shoes on kids' feet, something I had never done before. But the smiles I got from the kids, the hugs afterwards, their parents literally just thanking us over and over again was just an unbelievable experience. And so later that evening, I was with an Argentine buddy of mine who was a polo teacher, and I was talking to him about what we did. And he was really interested as well. He knew the area and how impoverished it was. And as I was telling him about this program, about the donation of the shoes and the giving of the shoes, he had a question that I really wasn't prepared for. Now, granted, I had just had an amazing day, right? I was like on a high from this experience and something that I had never done. And when I explained to him, he said, Blake, if the kids need shoes for school, and you just gave them a pair, that's great. But who's going to give them the next pair? Kids' feet grow fast. And if this is their only pair of shoes, they're going to wear out. So, what's happening next? Because the women that you met are going back to the States where you live, and who's going to continue to do this good work? And I remember not having a good answer to this question and going to bed that night actually feeling a little bit, I was down because I'd been on this big high from the experience, but then going to bed and not really having an answer to his question, I wondered, had we done something good that day, or had we just done something that made ourselves feel good? Because if we gave the shoes to the kids once, and then we got this false hope, and then all of a sudden, 4 or 5 months goes by and they don't have another pair, maybe we caused more harm than good. And I went to bed with that concern. And so I woke up the next morning and I was writing in my journal and thinking about this problem and thinking about what I could do personally to help. I thought of, what if instead of getting donations and being dependent on handouts of nice people to give shoes, what if there was an actual business model that could do this? And that's when I came up with the idea that we could start a shoe company, a for-profit business, but every time we sold a pair of shoes, we would give a pair away. And we called it one for one. Now, when I was writing all this in my journal, it definitely wasn't a business model, and it wasn't even a business. It was just an idea. And when Alejo came to tell me it was time for breakfast, and I told him, he just exploded with excitement. I mean, here's this guy, he's a polo player in Argentina, young guy, like 25, 26 years old. At the time, I'm 29. And he's so excited about this idea of a business that could actually help people in his country that need it so much. And so after several conversations, next thing I know, Alejo's calling his friend who knows a shoemaker, who knows another person, and you know how it goes. And next thing we know, we're literally in this guy's garage a day later learning how to make these shoes that are traditional in Argentina, the alpargata. We made 250 pairs of shoes, and I came back to Los Angeles with them packed in 3 duffel bags. Now, at this time, I was running a software company, a totally different industry, totally different world that was providing online education for students as part of their driver's education program in the state of California. And so I had to kind of get back to work. I didn't have a lot of time to be devoting to the shoe project, but I spent the weekends trying to get some stores in LA where I was living to carry the shoes. Luckily, I got this one really great store that is known for kind of starting a lot of trends in fashion, and I went back to work. Now, a couple days after we got into the store, or actually before I go there, let me pull up this picture. Yeah. So this is a picture we put in the store window because the buyer said, "I love your shoes, but I need to be able to tell your story." Because people will like the shoes, but what they're going to be more attracted to is the story. So I gave her this picture of me and one of the kids from my first trip, and underneath it we wrote, "With every pair of shoes sold, TOMS will give a new pair to a child in need, 1 for 1." And I didn't think much about this picture or the little display she put in the window. I was just excited that I had sold about 80 of my 250 pairs. So my goal was to sell 250 by Christmas and then go back to Argentina and give all the kids a new pair of shoes for Christmas. So I was already a third of my way there, and I was only, been home for about a month or so. So about a week after this happens, I get a call from this woman at the LA Times. And the woman's name is Booth Moore, and she's the leading fashion writer for the LA Times. And she had been in the store, saw this picture, and read about this idea that I would give away a pair for every pair sold. And in fashion, she had never heard of that before, and so she was interested. So I told her the whole story of my buddy Alejo and me and the factories and all this stuff, and she said, "Great, I'm gonna put it in my column." Well, on her normal column comes out on Saturday morning. So I got the paper Saturday morning and read her column, and there was nothing in there. So I thought, okay, well, that was that, no big deal. So on Sunday morning, I didn't even think to look at the paper, but it was not in the column, but instead it was actually on the cover of the LA Times. And there were two headlines. The first headline said, Da Vinci Code opens at 300 million in box office hits, which they care about in LA. And the second was TOMS shoes. Now get this, we sold 2,500 pairs of TOMS on our website from that single article, and I only had 130 pairs in my apartment. I like to call that my first of many supply chain problems to come. And the truth is, this is 2006. And so from 2006, as we started growing the business, we definitely have had our share of supply chain problems. If any of our retailers are in the audience, they're probably nodding their heads on how many orders for a very long time that we got completely wrong, completely delayed. It was definitely the hardest part about growing the TOMS business. And when GT Nexus invited me to come today to speak, I thought, this would be a great opportunity for me to say thank you for how much they've helped us. We started working with them like 3 years ago, but also show that there comes a point in your entrepreneurial journey where if you don't have the ability to look into your supply chain and kind of know what's going on and to automate things, then you're going to be at a huge disadvantage. And even as we got to several $100 million in revenue before we had this relationship, we were missing all different types of things. And so I think the part about this is that our supply chain problems started in the beginning, and then we got really intense in the middle. But I think now, if you are one of our customers out there, you know that it's a lot better now. And so first off, I just want to say thank you to GT Nexus, for having me to share this TOMS story, but also for the last couple years, because we've had a great improvement. But going back to 2006, so I have just gotten 2,500 orders, and I only have 160 pairs in the apartment. And the funny thing about that morning, I'll never forget, is I had a BlackBerry. And at that point in time, I had set my website to send me an email every time we got an order. And that was pretty cool because we were getting like 1 to 3 orders a day. And it'd be like, oh, my aunt just ordered a pair of shoes. My fraternity brothers from college ordered a pair of shoes. It was like this positive affirmation I was getting, 1 or 2 times a day, that this was actually kind of a cool thing that people were buying into. But when I got 2,500 orders, let me paint this picture. I woke up that morning, Sunday morning, probably a little bit hungover, and I roll out of bed, and first thing I do is I turn my BlackBerry on, and it starts vibrating uncontrollably, because all these emails are coming in, right? And I don't know if you remember when we all, or a lot of us had BlackBerries, but when it's vibrating so much, you can't even see the messages coming in because the guy gets locked up. So I sit it on my table, and then it just starts spinning around like it's possessed. And it did this for 20 minutes until the battery died. So I didn't even really know what was happening on that very fateful Sunday morning. And so then I go to meet my buddies at the Rose Cafe in Venice, where we always have Sunday brunch and you know, get you ready for the day. And I walk in, and this guy just jumps out of the booth, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing. Can you believe it?" And I'm thinking, you know, we eat here every Sunday. This isn't that exciting. But he then pulls out the article, and there it was on the cover of the LA Times. So I immediately go home. I do what I think a lot of entrepreneurs do in kind of a time of dire need. I started posting ads for interns on Craigslist. And I needed someone to answer these 2,500 people and tell them that their order was not going to be there in 4 days like our website promised, but it's probably going to be more like 8 or 9 weeks. I had no idea, by the way, if my friend Jose and Alejo could even make this many shoes in their garage in Argentina, but I was destined to find out. So I hop on a plane to Argentina. I take a DOP kit, you know, a couple change of clothes, and this article. I get off the airport, take a taxi to Jose's house, go back in the garage. There they are, making some shoes. And I pull out the paper and I say, "Muchos zapatos rapido." That was all the Spanish I knew. But that got the point across. And before we knew it, I was down there for about another month, and we got to where we could make about 800 pairs a week. So after a month, we got, you know, that was really, and that was using about 4 different people's garages. I mean, I talk about network. I had a network of local shoemakers in their garages as my supply chain in 2006. So we get it up to about 3,000 pairs of shoes. We ship them back, and I come back to LA. Now, in LA, and this is like July 2006. Now, July 2006, a movie came out called The Devil Wears Prada. I know there's a lot of guys in the room, but how many people saw that movie? Raise your hand. Oh, good. Enough people to make this funny. Good. So you got to admit, I get back, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do here, and you know, I got all these orders coming in, and next thing I know, when I got back, my girlfriend wanted to go see this movie. So we go see this movie, and I'm like, okay, it's a fine movie. I was like, that's totally a world I know nothing about. And then literally the next week, I get a call from Vogue magazine, from Anna Wintour's office, asking if I'll come to New York because they read the LA Times story, and they want to learn more about our project. So luckily, I go to New York. I'm completely horrified. I'm thinking, I saw what this woman did to Anne Hathaway's character. You know, what is she going to do to a guy from Texas who knows nothing about fashion? But I go to New York, or come here, I guess. We're in New York now. And luckily I do, because then this comes out. Now, Vogue does something really interesting here. Maybe it's obvious, but I'll point it out. You know, they make me look like I know exactly what I'm doing. All right? This is not like a guy who's selling shoes out of his apartment, who's making them in people's garages in Argentina. I mean, this makes it look like we're a real company. And because it's Vogue, you know, all these retailers from Nordstrom's to Bloomingdale's to Neiman Marcus, I mean, all of them just assumed when they read this that this was like a real deal, and like they could order shoes and they would come on time and stuff. And so I'll never forget this. A week after this article comes out, of course, we sell out of all our shoes again, right? So like 1 week of this out, I mean, all the replenishment that I just got is now gone, and we're back down to 0 in the apartment. And so I get a call, and it's funny because we had this phone line in our. This is when we kind of all had landlines in our apartments, and so we had 2 lines. We had one line for my 2 roommates and I that was our regular line, and then we had another line installed that we called the business line, and that we had one of those cordless phones. And I don't know if you remember when a lot of us had cordless phones, but if it was ever off the charger for too long, it would start beeping. And so we had this kind of rule, because we had a really crappy cordless phone, and it was always beeping, that it always would be on the charger, and whoever's closest would answer it. So it wasn't like one of the interns' jobs was to answer the phone or be customer service. We were all customer service all the time. Whoever's closest answers it. So it rings one day about a week after this article, and I answer it, and I say, "Hi, this is Blake, TOMS Shoes." And there's this guy on the other line, and he goes, "Yes, yes." And you can tell he's a little bit anxious. He says, "I need to order 100 pairs of women's TOMS. I want red, I want navy, I want natural, and I need them to go out today." And I'm thinking, oh, great. First off, this is the biggest order we've ever had, and it's one person ordering 100 shoes. That seems a little bit odd. And number two is we don't have any shoes. So I explained to the guy, I say, "Sir, I'm sorry, that's great, that's a lot of shoes. Where are you calling from?" And he said, "Oh, yes, sorry, I'm the assistant buyer at the corporate office of Nordstrom's in Seattle." And I'm like, wow. I don't know a lot about shoes at this point, but I know that Nordstrom is like the holy grail if you're trying to sell shoes. And so I'm excited, but then also have to tell him the bad news that we're sold out. So I tell him, and he says, I tell him, I say, "Sir, I'm sorry, we don't have any shoes to send right now, but if I can get your information, I'll make sure I'll let you know when we get some more in." He said, no, you don't understand. This is just a test order. It's 100 pairs. Just bump someone else's order and send me these shoes. And I say, "Sir, it's not like I can bump someone else's order. I'm really sold out." At this point, this guy gets pissed off at me. And he says, "Listen, buddy," exactly. He says, "if you can't help me, put me in touch with someone in sales." So here I am holding my crappy cordless phone that is going to start beeping at any second. I'm looking at my 3 interns eating breakfast tacos at my kitchen table. And there's this one girl, Lena, and she's kind of overhearing this, and she goes, "Give me the phone, give me the phone." So I toss her the phone. She catches it. Without even hesitation, she goes, "Hi, this is Lena, head of sales." And literally, she talked this guy into calming down, explained that the guy in the magazine was the guy that she spoke to. And next thing I know, they agreed to wait at least a couple months, and then we shipped them, and today Nordstrom's is still one of our biggest customers. So that summer, because of this article and a few other things, we sold 10,000 pairs out of my apartment. 10,000 pairs. It was amazing. So then it was time to go give them away, which created a whole new supply chain set of issues. But it was an amazing opportunity to take friends and family down to Argentina and to hand place these shoes on these kids' feet. I took my parents who had never been out of the United States before. I took my brother, my sister, a few fraternity brothers. We all went down to Argentina, met up with Alejo, who was polo player now turned shoemaker, his family, his college roommate, her family, and we all went and we placed these shoes on the kids' feet. And it was just the most amazing experience. The first day I went to the village before I started TOMS was incredible, but this time to have my friends and family and to be putting these shoes on these kids' feet that needed them so much was incredible. And probably the most incredible moment of the trip was about a week and a half into it when we were leaving this clinic. And as I was leaving this clinic, this woman came up to me crying in Spanish and shouting to get my information, to get my attention. And my Spanish, I couldn't understand what she was saying, and we had just given all the kids shoes, so I didn't understand what was wrong. And so I got Alejo out of the van. I said, "Alejo, come here. I'm going to ask you to talk to this woman. We got to go to the next clinic." And so he asked her what was wrong, and when she started to talk to him in Spanish, she stopped crying, and she started smiling. But as I looked at Alejo listening, I saw a tear coming down his eye. And I realized that she wasn't crying because she was sad, she was crying because she was happy. And she had these 3 boys with her, and they were all wearing a brand new pair of red TOMS shoes. She explained to Alejo that for the past year, her 3 boys, those are her sons, had been sharing a single pair of shoes. And what they had been doing is the oldest son, they were like black, old leather Oxford men's shoes that were clearly handed down to them. They didn't fit any of the kids properly, but they would literally shuffle in them to get to school. And so they would take these shoes, and the oldest son would wear them on Monday, come home while his 2 younger brothers stayed home because they couldn't go to school without shoes, give them to his middle brother, and then he would have to wait till Thursday to get the pair of shoes back to go to school. So, I mean, many of us probably in this room have kids. And can you imagine if your kids desperately, and the kids desperately want to go to school there because they know that's the only way they can improve their lives, that they wouldn't be going to school every day just because of a pair of shoes? And when she told me that story, and I met her and saw her children straight up, that's when I came back to Los Angeles and really started investing in TOMS so that it wouldn't just be a fun project, but it could be a real business. But I really had no idea what would happen after that. I started hiring people that knew how to talk to sales associates at Nordstrom's. After that, we started getting more press. We hit 50,000 pairs of shoes, and this People magazine article came out. A couple years later, we got to 1 million pairs of shoes. Then we hit the 10 million number shoe mark, which just seemed unbelievable. At that point, we realized we needed to make more shoes than just the original shoes, so we started making boots and wedges and brogues for guys, which made our supply chain even more complex. And then we expanded into eyewear because we realized we could use our one-for-one model to help more people, not just with shoes, but with sight. So with our sunglasses and glasses, every time you buy a pair, we pay for either a cataract surgery for someone who's blind, or we give children prescription glasses that can't afford them in many different countries around the world, and even here in the United States with the Helen Keller Institute. And we believe that our one-for-one model, beyond helping people with sight, can work in all different types of industries in the future. And through all this amazing journey now that's been 10 years, I've learned a lot of things. But I think the thing that I always like to kind of end with, that I think is kind of relevant no matter what industry you're in, is this, is that giving feels good. When I went to that village that first day and put shoes on kids' feet, or when I did it with my parents, it was an amazing feeling. It filled me up and continues to every time I get to go on one of these trips. And so whether you're donating to a local charity or doing something within your company to help locally or globally, it feels good. But also, giving can be a really good business strategy. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I think for a long time we had this idea that, you know, business was just to make profits and nonprofit was to help, you know, causes. But what I've seen over the last 10 years, and I think what we hopefully have shown the world, is that you can be very profitable and you can do a lot of good in the world. And sometimes, if you organize your business, your giving strategy properly, it can actually drive a lot more profits. The 3 ways I've seen this happen: first off, your customers become your greatest marketers. They become a loyalist and an evangelist for your mission because they're not just buying a product, they're joining a movement. And the second thing is the most important and definitely expensive part. I mean, you just heard about 200 new jobs being added to GT Nexus. Well, it takes a lot to recruit amazing talent and to retain them. And so when you have a mission that's incorporated into your business, you not only attract amazing people in a much more competitive way, but you retain them and they're inspired to work hard because they're not just working for a paycheck anymore, they're working for something bigger than that. And then the third thing is you attract amazing partners. I mean, TOMS would never be where it is today if we didn't have such amazing partners. And the reason we have amazing partners is because people want to see us be successful. They get excited about how their software or their design services or whatever they're doing to work with us are actually enabling us to do more good in the world. And so I truly believe that while giving feels good and everyone should do it for that reason, my hope is that our story inspires more companies to see that giving can also be great for business. So thank you for allowing me to share my story, and GT Nexus, thank you for your help.